All right, is everybody ready to get started here? All right, well, hello and welcome to Unveiling the Power of a Seamless Supply Chain. We're excited to have you here with us today and look forward to getting into the details about what makes a supply chain truly connected. We're with Westernacher. Westernacher specializes in end-to-end supply chain execution across the globe, and we've been a close partner with SAP since the 90s. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our team of experts we have today. From Westernacher, we have practice directors Paul, Marco, and Michael. And from SAP, we have Cam from the Center of Excellence, Bill, and Ganesh, who are both product owners. The collective years of experience and knowledge we have today is unique. We have both product, process, and implementation experts, and everybody's ready to answer all of your questions. Speaking of questions, as those come up, please leave them in the chat and we will make sure to get them answered. All of our attendees, please keep yourself muted, and this session will be recorded and everybody will get the recording following. So with that, let's dive into all things supply chain. So Cam, I'm coming to you first. Can you talk a little bit about what makes a supply chain truly connected?
Hi, Maddie. Hi, everyone. Yeah, when we talk about connected supply chain, I like to look at it in two layers. The first one is connecting your processes within your organization, and the second one is connecting with the external world, with your trading partner. So when we talk about connecting with your organization, this means allowing you to make business decisions based on relevant information. So bringing your supply chain inside your business decisions. It could be as simple as the customer service representative having visibility of the status of the order within your warehouse. Is it picked? Is it packed? And so on. And the most important here is making sure that this information is relevant. So I can pick based on the transportation plan. I can make business decisions based on my supply chain. The second part, which usually a lot of customers struggling with, is connecting your organization to the external world. And this is very important. And when we talk about external world, we're talking about trading partners. We're talking about suppliers, co-packers, carriers, logistics service providers, and others. And this is extremely important because it allows your organization to have greater visibility, better collaboration with your outside world, and more efficiency across your supply chain. So for example, if you're in a production and you don't know when your raw material will arrive, this is the challenge that we're trying to fix. So when we talk about connected supply chain, it is internal within your processes as well as it's external. At SAP, our whole supply chain strategy is tailored around the connected supply chain. So if you look at it from a process point of view, we look at supply chain starting from the design, so starting from product design to the planning, to the manufacturing part, then to the logistics, where should I pick it from, how to deliver it, up to the maintenance and the service. So connecting every process, making sure it's a process integration across your supply chain, giving you end-to-end visibility. And when we talk about the outside world, this is where what we call at SAP the business network, bringing all the collaboration and contextual data into your business. So real-time data into your business with your ecosystem. And if we think that collaborating with a carrier or a supplier is difficult, think that many of our customers today are working with a multi-tier collaboration. So it's not enough today to know what's happening at my supplier. I need to know what's happening at my supplier's supplier. And this is what we call the network. So it's not enough to have a point-to-point. It's very important to have a network and visibility across all your supply chain. Back to you, Maddie.
That's awesome. Thank you, Cam. Paul, do you want to talk a little bit about a truly connected supply chain and what that means to you with your experience with Westernacher?
Yeah, Maddie, absolutely. So over the last few years, we've been one of the first partners to implement a holistic SAP-based digital supply chain platform, which is what you'll see us demo today. And we're in the process of rolling this out for a few other customers globally at the moment. typically when I'm talking to customers and seeing them go through this, supply chain transformation, I see a couple of things come out as pretty clear points and what makes it so important. And that comes down to communication and shifting from being reactive to predictive and ultimately to prescriptive. On the communication front, usually it's stakeholder communication becomes real time. So for example, in our demo, you'll see that carriers and transportation managers are able to share comments back and forth in real time. Attachments can be shared with the doc team immediately from carriers. Emails can be sent automatically based on statuses or different milestones that get hit. I mean, if you think of Amazon today, Amazon will send you a text or a push notification that your package is 6 stops away, or you'll be able to send a message to a customer that your order is ready for pickup at a warehouse, or even to confirm a dock time with a carrier and walk them through your yard process. Ultimately, clear communication prevents mistakes and improves the overall experience to make you the customer of choice. And ultimately, the shift from reactive to prescriptive, again, with a truly connected supply chain, it's not just the real-time communication, but it's taking some of the underlying statuses and updates that occur to essentially trigger updates or trigger downstream or upstream communications to solve problems before they actually occur. An example I could think of for this would be essentially sending messages of readiness, like we talked about, to a carrier, or statuses to stakeholders like your customers, carriers, vendors, some of those external stakeholders that Cam was just talking about. You could even look at doing a process trigger for something like a dock appointment time based off of a delay that you have in your warehouse from picking. Back to you, Maddie.
Thank you, Paul. So you mentioned a little bit about communication being a pain point and something we need to focus. Marco, can you talk a little bit about other pain points you're having and how those pain points have evolved over the past few years?
Yeah, of course. So I think for all of us as supply chain professionals and the whole industry, the pandemic was a big eye opener, right? There was lots of problems to deal with, and we saw how fragile the whole network globally actually is. I do think the technology was not the problem, so availability of technology, right? So let me unpack that a little bit. There's a lot of great solutions out there, right? Over the past 20, 30 years, there was a big advancements in technology availability, but that's what we're seeing from our customers. Those solutions have evolved in their own niche, and that is partially due to, of course, suppliers of technology, but also organizations. They have rigid organizational structures and that creates communication silos. So if let's say a warehouse business executive or supply chain executive looks for a warehouse solution, and then separately the other department is looking for a transportation solution, there are good solutions on the market right now, but they were not connected. And now with all those problems that we had during the pandemic, I think a lot of our customers realized that if you deal with problems, there's 2 main issues: visibility on where the problem occurs, and then communication latency. Because to drive action, once you've identified where the problem is, you need to have a single source of truth on the data. And then, of course, when you want to drive action, we increasingly see it's not just within your own organization and across your departments, but to what Cam and Paul said, it's also with your business partners, your suppliers, your customers, right? So if you're not having the right tools in place, or everybody has different tools and they're not properly integrated, you're not operating on the same single source of truth. That's what we find a lot of organizations struggling with right now. They sit on a huge amount of data, but they are all proprietary in format. They have different technologies to access them. So there's a challenge to uncover those insights and then have the right tools in place to drive action. I think that's a big thing we're seeing. And now from how have they evolved, right? A lot of organizations have recognized that problem and they try to break down those self-erected walls, but they're still struggling defining a roadmap. So we get a lot of requests on how do we get there actually, right? Where to start, what to do, and what kind of technology to use. And I might want to add another last point, maybe. Technology in itself, of course, is not the silver bullet, but we're also seeing a massive emergence of operational technology, especially for the supply chain, that helps us gain more efficiencies. Just one example is AMRs, autonomous mobile robots. They are very modern, the modern technology under the hood, right? But very modern technology components that can help take away low value tasks from human resources. They were a scarce resource during the pandemic, so we realized how big of a problem that is. But by applying that modern technology, you can free up human workers to do more value added tasks, right? Where you really need the human brain and thinking. And we see a big shift on the question of how can we automate to how fast can we automate actually, right? So it's really us as technology professionals, we're answering more and more the question, how fast can you implement a solution? What's the best road map to drive this technology advancements, and then how fast can I get there, right? So that's, I would say, the main big themes. Yeah, it's improving visibility across the whole supply chain and across organizations, and then putting the right tools in place for unified collaboration and communication to drive action.
Absolutely, very important things. And as we're talking about modern technology and moving into the future, Cam, can you talk to us about any new themes emerging that are defining the future of what a truly connected supply chain is?
You know, technology is moving very fast, and maybe each one of us could easily pick 5, 6 trends that we see every day. But if I want to pick the top 3, I would say AI and machine learning and robotics, and I want to elaborate later on what Marco has mentioned. And the third one, which is becoming very important, is sustainability. But let me start very quickly with AI and machine learning, because it's very interesting. My memory serves me, ChatGPT started last November. And imagine that they are adding 100 million users on a monthly basis, making it the fastest growing consumer application in history. AI and machine learning is not new at all. I think it's from the 70s even, so it's not new, but the application today is very relevant. Almost each one of us is using AI and machine learning in one way or another. Last week, LinkedIn used an AI to improve my profile. So it's just imagine where it is embedded in everything we do today. And in SAP, this is a very big topic. And I'm sure Ganesh and Bill will talk about the application of AI in SAP and the specific applications, but it is there and it's very tangible. Moving to robotics, and this is very interesting because in the past, when we talk about robotics or automation, we think of a cage, we think of a robotic arm, we think of a dedicated area in the warehouse. Today, I have the vacuum cleaner running in the background. It's a robot working alone with the pet, with the kids, without any concern. And this is when we talk about autonomous robots, we talk about this intelligence, it is there. And Marco mentioned something very, very important. Our customers today are looking at this technology and how can we get it fast? How can we realize value? And in reality, they don't care about the technology. What they care is about what problem this technology is helping them fix and how quickly we can fix it. And this is where one example is in Germany of one of SAP EWM customer, Bechtel. They are a technology distributor. They added robotics in 5 weeks with SAP, with the cloud robotics. So this is what we're talking about. Most important, I want to repeat it because with blockchain, many people started, we want to implement blockchain and then trying to find where the problem is. This will never work, and it's trial and error. Today, what we see more customers is looking at the challenges they have, labor shortages, moving more into the e-commerce, putting more pressure into picking, piece picking, and so on, making autonomous robots or collaborative robots a need. And the business value is self-explanatory there. A good example is one of our customers, John Deere. They use AI for predictive maintenance. And I was reading that they reduced their maintenance by 20%. And this is just the beginning. And this is what we want to see. The third one that I mentioned is sustainability. And really, it's a very, very big topic. And I'm not sure if everyone knows, but supply chain contributes to 60% of the carbon emission global. It's a very, very big number. There is a lot of pressure. Maybe Europe is ahead of the US in terms of what's going on and how much they have control. But California has put very tough rules. They were announced recently, and it's coming. And there is a very nice article I read in the Harvard Business Review. I will just share the name because we don't have time to discuss it. It says, carbon might be your company's biggest financial liability, and it's coming. You can't get away from it. And one thing what is very important is carbon liability and the cost of pollution is no longer something we can ignore. And since we're talking about the connected supply chain, it's not enough today to track my order. I want also to track the carbon footprint of this order. And this is becoming more and more important. At SAP, sustainability is embedded in every process. And we expect that this will help companies move to the future. So that's it. Back to you, Maddie.
Now I'm throwing it to Bill. Bill, do you have anything to add about themes emerging that are defining what truly connected supply chain will look like in the future?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll talk about AI and how it's relevant to TM and sustainability when we talk about roadmap later. For now, one of the themes we've seen ever more recently, already in place as opposed to looking into the future, is how we connect. And I think Marco and Cam also touched on this earlier, is how do folks collaborate or connect with their logistics partners or the external partners. And it's something that's always been critical from a TMS perspective. I've always joked, from a TMS perspective, in not being able to talk to the outside world, not being able to talk to your partner, your carriers is kind of like, it's the same as having a phone that doesn't connect to a mobile network. What's the point? You can have the best plan in the world, but if you're not able to share it with your partners who are going to actually have to execute it, it's irrelevant. Okay. So what we've seen is a lot of interest in folks being able to, focus on how do they connect with their external transportation partners. Not just connect with them, but connect with them when and where and how those partners want and need to be able to connect. You have different maturity levels. You have some folks that are very much, just web UI. Others are very, forward thinking, looking at APIs. And then you have the, big group in the middle that basically is, they're going to hold on to EDI for as long as they can. And so being able to support working with them, in the medium or the channel they need to. And when we talk about this, it's also, what are we collaborating or what are we connecting with them for? How do we, collaborate with them for subcontracting or tendering of loads? How do we connect with them for status messages? And then, how do we also connect with them, from the, financial part of things, getting an invoice, then managing any kind of disagreements or, back and forth in terms of, what was the actual freight cost, things like that. And then there's connectivity, based on that information. And I think Cam, you mentioned it, Cam or Marco, but also connecting internally. How do I get all that information back to the other parts of the organization? There was a study, I can't remember who it was a few years ago, it was an analyst, that basically, one of the industry analysts that basically said, the transportation department has data or information that at least 8 other parts of the organization need access to. Okay, so if you think about it, it's like, how do I make sure the customer, and I think we already touched on it a little bit, but how does the customer service rep know what the status of the order is? How do merchants know what the status of their PO is? Manufacturing or inventory management, they need, it's critical, they need to know not just the status, but, where is it in real time? From an inventory perspective, it's okay, it's more in terms of getting a reliable idea of, okay, what kind of safety stock do they need to hold? From manufacturing, it's, hey, if this is critical, I need to know, is it here? Is it in the yard? Where is it? That kind of thing. And then accounting needs to, of course, always need to know, okay, if they're having issues from a settlement or from an invoice perspective, I need to access to the details of this, so I don't have to make so many phone calls. So there's connectivity both internally and externally, and it's just an area that it's always been there, but I think it's gotten more highlighted over the past few years, especially when you talk in terms of visibility. So that's one of the more current and more salient topics for us.
Take it over to Ganesh to see how all these topics are affecting warehouse operations. So Ganesh, from your perspective, talking about the warehouse, what are the hot topics that you're seeing?
Sure. Yeah. So I think Cam, Marco, and Paul covered the relevance of communication, visibility, relevance, context, etc. in today's connected supply chains, and that's all very important for companies to be agile and resilient. But it's very critical that your warehouses through which your goods are moving are operating efficiently and you're increasing the utilization, both the space utilization as well as the resource utilization. So this requires a couple of things which kind of form the themes of what are emerging from a warehousing perspective. The first one is obviously the connectivity. So seamlessly being able to integrate your processes with the adjacent processes, and these adjacent processes could be very industry specific or more generic, like inbound and outbound transportation, quality management. When product comes in, you need to be able to assess the quality of the products before you put them away. Integration into production from a production warehouse perspective, plant maintenance or global trade services, etc. So some of these capabilities are being now required as part of a connected supply chain from a process perspective, which also requires that the data transparency and communication of information between these processes happen seamlessly. The other aspect of this is around the use of technology. Digitization and automation is also becoming very relevant from a warehouse perspective. Marco talked about how can we better utilize the resources to do more value-added services versus doing the mundane tasks. So and there are many examples of technology like artificial intelligence and machine learning that Cam talked about. Also augmented reality. A lot of our customers are using augmented reality these days from say a picking perspective, and they're seeing a lot of productivity increases from their warehouse operations. And also a lot of companies around the globe are facing labor shortages, and this is where the use of robots and cobots come into play to be able to work alongside the warehouse workers to help increase the efficiency of the warehouse operations. From this aspect, SAP released the SAP Warehouse Robotics last year. It helps automate the warehouse operations with easy and fast onboarding of robots from multiple vendors, so you're not really locked into a particular vendor, and you're able to efficiently orchestrate the tasks with the integration to these robots. So there's a robust integration between SAP Extended Warehouse Management and SAP Warehouse Robotics that eliminates the proprietary dependence on any particular robotic solution, and it provides standard APIs from the communication aspect that was touched upon earlier to across different fleet management systems, and enables collaborative and efficient warehouse task orchestration between the workers and robots inside the warehouse. And it also helps monitor the status of the robots during the warehouse task processing, so you are at all times have visibility into the execution of the tasks within the warehouse. So this is a very emerging theme of using robots and automating some of the processes within the warehouse that we are seeing.
Awesome, thank you. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Loud and clear, perfect, okay. Michael, you've been a little bit quiet, so I'm gonna put you on the spot. Are you seeing any specific reoccurring requests and requirements from your customers during implementation projects? Are there any industry trends visible in supply chain execution projects? What are your thoughts?
Actually, we do, and both the main catalysts we have already touched upon by Cam and Marco. So it's one of the things is, first of all, the entire supply chain is getting closer together, and the second thing is that COVID and the pandemic has been a catalyst, because all of a sudden supply chain became an issue that even highly ranked politicians talked about supply chain before the pandemic. They didn't even know what supply chains were. So a problem became aware that there is something going on. Plus, we saw that everything is coming back to, closer together. And that results in us on the implementation side seeing a shift from individual projects. So customers doing individual warehouse implementations, transportation implementations, yard implementations, going away from that and more holistically looking into their logistics operations and supply chain operations. So we are talking to our customers more about end-to-end processes and how these processes work together, because as I have mentioned, latest by COVID, we have seen that optimizing your transportation or optimizing your warehouse is a great thing to do, but it will have nothing in the end-to-end picture if any other function in the supply chain is not working. So your warehouse can be at 120% efficiency and everything is fine in the warehouse, but if your transportation is not up to par, then basically the entire process is still gonna fail. And this is what many customers have seen during the pandemic, that topics like what we have heard already, labor shortage and everything plays in there. So from a logistics operational perspective, everything has to work together. The transportation, the planning, the yard connecting transportation and warehousing and everything that happens basically in between the four walls. And this reflects on our projects that we are doing with our customers. So instead of implementing only SAP TM, only EWM, only yard logistics, we do see more projects that implement either a combination of two or even all of those modules, together with even other topics like supply chain planning, for example, or resource management, in order to get to this highly integrated supply chain that also unlocks the value that is really there in integrating all these processes. So supply chain convergence is really something that is becoming key in removing the boundaries and the silos of all those operations within our customers and creating all those synergies between those processes. And the second topic is change management. And I like to talk a lot about change management because customers now doing their shift from ERP to SAP S/4HANA obviously talk a lot about change management, yeah, because this is a big digital transformation. Change management is always kind of top on the list. If we're talking supply chain and logistics implementations, organizational change management, unfortunately, is often forgotten. And I think this is something which we have to also put on top of the list, because we are doing a big change here, yeah, not only from a process perspective. So not only processes are changing quite a lot by tight integrations and basically the entire logistics process being connected, but it also has an influence on anyone who is right now involved working in those key functions. And I want to give you here an example of the transportation planner in your department, for example, who nowadays plans freight and makes sure that things are getting from A to B on time and as hassle-free as possible, writing tons of emails to carriers, having phone calls from 9 to 5 all day long. This is going to change. This person will not work like that in the future anymore. This person in the future will manage exceptions, will only look into the topics that went wrong, will manage and look at KPIs in order to assess how the transportation works in general, and will more look into questions like, how can I improve? Yeah, how can I further reduce cost? And that is a change of that persona, and that is a change of that role that we have to make sure that everyone is aware of, and especially that person is aware of, that this job profile is going to fundamentally change. So which is why change management is a crucial part that more and more customers are also getting aware of, that it becomes a part of this journey.
Thank you, Michael. That was very helpful. We could talk about this all day, but let's get into a demo and show everybody what we're talking about here. I'm going to start sharing this demo and we will just dive right into it. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Here we go.
All right, so as we get logged in here, maybe we'll just take a quick pause too right off the bat. So hopefully a lot of our viewers have already started their S4 journey in some sense of the way. But if we rewind just a little bit here, one of the things that I think is very important to call out as we go into this demo is we're going to be showing a pretty basic process. You know, this is going to be outbound from one of our facilities. It's going to touch all of our areas across transportation, our carrier contacts, the warehouse, the yard, and just fully go through that process. But Maddie, if we go back right after the Fury login, and then if we just pause there, something that resonated with what Michael had talked about around organizational change management is the fact that we can have multiple tiles, not just tied to a single role anymore. So here I am in my SAP box. Nope.
I think I go too far.
It's all good. Let's just go to like 13 seconds in.
Okay.
Perfect. But my user of the past might just be transportation planning, but my user of the future will have access to see everything from transportation planning to my yard check-in process to my warehouse monitor and be able to see across the board for the whole supply chain. So here I'm going to go ahead and dive directly into one of my freight orders. And as we go in here, this is an order that we've already planned to remove some of the boring foreground stuff that normally happens in the background. And here we'll see that we already have kicked off the tendering process. This is a pretty generic waterfall style tendering. We'll just pause for a second here. I've called out it's open. I already have my rates calculated across the board. This might be my preferred carrier. Now under that, I see I have another couple of steps. What we see more and more is as people shift away from what Michael said with the doing, you know, emails and phone calls all day, every day, we might go ahead and set it up to reach out to our favorite carrier for a lane, or our lowest cost carrier for a lane, or our contractually obligated carrier for a particular lane. And then in case of a negative or missed response, instead of having to pick up and figure out who to go to next, I'll automatically kick it to a group of carriers or to a group of carriers that might not have a contract with, and they can just name their price. We've even seen customers who are really running add in a third component, which would be like an Uber freight integration. So you're really going to a freight board for naming a price and getting a number back. We'll go ahead and keep the demo rolling though. And for this case, we're just going to do a generic peer-to-peer to start everything. So here is the planner. Again, all these processes happen in the background. I see I have an open RFQ for that first one. And now it's going to kick it over to my carrier. So here's your carrier's view as we get into the business network. I'm going to go ahead and click into my freight RFQ. Here I see it. I can accept it at the header, but I'm going to go one level deeper. I see how much time I have left. I can see a lot of the requirements around it, my cargo in case of, you know, over dimension, dangerous goods, my tour for where I'm actually going, any contacts in case I have to reach out and ask somebody. I can type in a quick note like I will be there. And this is where that real-time communication starts to come in. So I'll go ahead and accept this. And what this is going to do is it's going to go back in real time to my transportation planner. So all I'd have to do is refresh this screen. And since that carrier accepted, it's automatically assigned. My note is populated so I can see what the carrier communicated to me. Any attachments would be shared. And just like that, we'll see our carrier pop up in just a second here. There we go. So I can even see the date and the time. And then if we go over to our notes tab, after I see that he's accepted across the bottom, let me see here. Yep, so we'll get over to notes, and just like that, we see our carrier's note that was shared in real time. So I will be there. And you're able to respond back or share anything else with them. In this case, I'm going to go in and check as the carrier to confirm an order. So just like that, I can confirm it. And this becomes important because, you know, transportation can sometimes not go according to plan. So with that, it's important to share those real-time updates. Here I see execution's not started and I haven't got a confirmation. So if I just refresh it, I now see we're ready for execution and we have had this order confirmed by our carrier. So we're really ready for that next step. So typically what comes after is where we handshake with the yard. So what we're going to do next as the carrier is we're going to schedule our dock appointment. And if we just pause here for just a second, what we're going to see is a lot of available dock times. And this is an interesting part because it's where we handshake with not just the yard, saying here's when you can expect a carrier to show up and start booking some of these tasks for check-in and eventually check out. But it's also where we handshake with our dock team over at the warehouse. These time slots available are actually being shared back with the shipper component of our business network. So I've seen customers have this view for the dock at their warehouse, so they can see what's planned for the day, what's planned for the week. They're able to see attachments from the carriers come through. They're able to share real-time updates, reschedule, put stuff such as dock cleanup on there so carriers can't book during a certain time slot. We'll go ahead and unpause it and keep moving here. But now as my carrier, I'm going to be able to select a time slot that shows as available. I'm going to be able to maintain it. And then as I called out earlier, I might want to go ahead and add an attachment or add some notes that can be shared back with that dock team. So what I'll do for that is I'll just scroll down to the bottom here. I can see my relevant order numbers. And here I have the option to toss in an attachment. So I'll throw something in, just maybe a freight waybill from one of my older orders. So once I get that tossed in, I'll save it. Perfect. And now what we're going to do is we're going to show the kind of the other side of this. So this is what your dock team might expect to see from the warehouse side. So I'll manage my dock appointments. I can see all my various locations. Within here, I can expect to have a number of dock doors set up. In case of 3PLs or third-party warehouses, you can even filter it so you have parameters in place so they are limited to what they see. And then I can check and see what my actual schedule is for the week. I can see that order that we just placed. So if I click it, I can get more information such as the driver information, the license plate numbers, when they're planned, when they're going to leave, any attachments. So here, just like that. Again, I mentioned I tossed an old waybill in there. So this is for one of our, one of our older orders. But you can share attachments and notes back and forth in real time to really focus on this being your system of communication. Now, with all that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Michael, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the check-in process now that we have a carrier who's been assigned the order, they have a rate established, they've confirmed it, they've set their dock appointment, and now they're going to show up at our yard. So Michael, it's all you.
Perfect, Paul. Thank you so much. And as Paul has said, so from a process perspective, transportation planning is pretty much done. From a yard standpoint, yard planning is also done because we have received the freight order into yard logistics. We know when the driver is arriving. So basically, the next step that now has to happen is that we have to sit back and wait for that driver to come, and we are now going to see how this works with a check-in process. So obviously, in the yard, there are multiple check-in options. Yes, so you can have a self check-in, which means an app which is running on a tablet or a terminal, or basically someone sitting at the gate and doing the check-in himself. So one of the things that are very crucial here is that obviously in a self check-in scenario, we are doing this in a local language. We are showing the driver a couple of things that they have to obey. For example, adhering to speed limits, wearing safety clothes, making sure that we are here only processing trailers out of a certain age. So those are requirements that many customers have as, let's say, entry requirements. And once the driver has confirmed that, the next step is that, as you see, the driver is identifying himself with a reference number, which is basically the freight order number that we are about to pick up. He's providing his name as well as telephone number, which is very important for us to communicate with the driver throughout the process by standard SMS integration. So we can send this driver SMS throughout the process, for example, to pull to a door. We ask for the trailer number. This is all information that could also come through the booking process in the business network, but here it's captured during the check-in. And at the end of the day, the driver confirms that he has read all the messages, that he confirms everything is right, and he is checked into the yard within a couple of moments. Another cool feature that I personally like a lot is what we are seeing here is the 3D cockpit. So it's a digital twin of your yard and your premises. And if we zoom in, you see that past the gatehouse, there's our truck, and it's standing now there at an inspection area, waiting to be inspected before we are moving the truck further to our warehouse to be loaded. So yard logistics, being, let's say, an application of execution rather than planning, comes with a lot of mobile applications in order to also support mobile scenarios in the yard and mobility, because something like check-in, inspection, those are things that are not done by people in front of their laptops. So the inspection app that you see here comes as standard functionality in yard logistics, and basically follows a pre-configured process. So the person that is doing the inspection sees our truck that we are working with here, and also sees what needs to be inspected. So we have basically just 2 inspections here, a damage check. So we're gonna check if the trailer is damaged or not. In this case, obviously everything is good. And we check for the cleanliness of the truck, and the truck is in our case clean. And you also see we actually also have the possibility to also add attachments. So if there's something broken, we could also take a picture from here. So after the truck has been cleared, the next thing obviously is that someone needs to confirm this truck at the warehouse. And this is now a view of basically the warehouse personnel at the door, who would now basically confirm the truck arrival. So you see there's a yard task for the truck to move to the door, and you see that we are planned this truck to door number 1. And in case you're wondering where this planning comes from, we are receiving that information from the warehouse, because the warehouse tells us where we need to send the truck based on the staging of the goods that has been happening beforehand. So obviously from here, we could also edit, we could also make sure that the truck goes somewhere else if needed. But in our case, we confirm that the truck is now arriving at door 1. And if we are now going back into our nice 3D visualization and refresh from here, you see that our truck is now also moving away from the inspection area to our warehouse door, where it's now being docked. In this case, the yard now has sent a message to the warehouse that obviously the trailer has arrived at the door, and that we are now ready for loading, and that we now can basically start the warehousing process.
Okay, so now the interesting part happens. We have basically, if we pause for a second here, we have basically a trailer at the door, and the warehouse process itself, the execution has been started in the background already, right? So we're focusing here on, of course, the operational processes, but I want to quickly explain what has happened with all that data that was shared across the solutions. So first of all, we had a customer order, and that has been translated into a delivery, and our transportation solution has planned that delivery. So we know it's, I think we have 15 pallets here in this case, so it's a little less than a truckload. That information, that planning result, was distributed to the warehouse, and we have that load plan. So we know at this, we also have the time slot, that was communicated. So we know at that specific time, we have to have those 15 pallets staged. Ideally, of course, we do a pre-staging or a very close to dock time staging, so that once the truck arrives and docks to the door, we're ready to load, we're ready to pick. We've pulled that back a little bit so you can see what's actually happening. So we have created a wave of different orders, and based on that scheduled time, and actually if we have that integration, even based on real-time GPS tracking of a truck on the road, we can trigger with backwards calculation and an idea of how long specific picks for, let's say, 15 pallets takes. We can trigger the release of those orders to the operational pickers based on the position of the truck on the road. So that's really, that's what's possible today. That's state of the art. So you can time your workload based on the outside view, outside of your four walls. That's a true value of those integrated solutions. In our case here now, we have released those orders, and what we're going to see right now when we continue is we have an operational user picking up those orders, and we're operating in a mode that we call system guided. So the system assigns the next best task to the operator, and all he needs to do, in this case it's full pallets, yeah, so we're not picking individual cases or eaches, we're just scanning those pallets here. We're in the rack, we pick up 2 pallets, you could see here we scan those, and then they are being driven to the staging area in the goods issue zone, and we drop them there. So we confirm that part, that the in-warehouse move has been executed. Now we see the supervisor view, where we can monitor the progress for a specific delivery. So you can see we've sped up time a little bit here. Yeah? The picking process has been completed. So we've picked not just 2, but all those 15 pallets that we needed. And now we have another integration point where we can signal to the transportation planner, to the execution team, we're done with that. So based on that timestamp that we've just sent over, they could already collaborate again with a carrier. They could send a notification to the customer, look, your orders actually are picked. Yeah, so we're getting ready to send them out the door. There's a last step missing here. We need to load them still. So imagine we've staged it, but now we need to load it to the truck. And if you pause here for a second again, I want to quickly explain, whoever maybe has one of those solutions in place already, there's something very new and exciting in here. We're leveraging a technology that's called advanced shipping and receiving. And that goes beyond what we've talked before, convergence. That's actually more merging than converging. We basically have all those solutions, yard logistics, transportation management, and warehouse management, using the freight order as one single source of truth, as one data object. So this is quite technical, but under the hood, we've simplified all those interfaces, whatever we talked about before. Yeah, best of breed solutions, they all need to have integrations and send messages back and forth. What we've done here is we have one single object, which is the freight order, and warehouse management, yard logistics, and of course transportation management that created that freight order all operate against that single document. So whatever we're doing in warehousing, you can see here, this is a new screen that SAP has delivered with that solution. We basically monitor, this is a shipping cockpit for some outbound planner. We monitor the progress of that freight order, but with a view on what's happening in the warehouse. And if we continue here, we can see, of course, here we're just looking at an individual one. Typically, you would have your whole day's workload in here, right? So you would see for this warehouse number, I have whatever I have to do on this day. But if we just focus on this single freight order that we are currently operating with, you can see the status you see here of each individual pallet. Yeah, so you can see if it's picked. You can see the loading status. So now as everything is pre-staged and the truck is docked to the door, our users can go ahead, our operational users, and can scan those pallets from the dock and then load them into that truck. And as we want to make sure we load them into the right truck, we use this as again, system guided operation. So you drive up to the staging lane, and then you scan each barcode of each individual pallet, and then you confirm them by scanning them into the truck, into the trailer. And we're speeding up time here, of course, a little bit again as well. We're not showing all pallets. So once all pallets are loaded on the warehouse floor, the user can go back to other tasks. Yeah, picking system will automatically assign the next best task to them. Our supervisor here, if they just go back and refresh and look if the order is now ready, immediately by loading each individual pallet, we see the status refresh here, so they can monitor in real time what's happening on the floor. Here you can see the finalized view. Yeah, so everything is green, which means it's great. Everything is done. And you can also see there's a breakdown by stop even. So if transportation has planned several stops, we can see the progress per stop. In this case, we're fully done with our warehousing process. Now there's other activities that could happen, right? We print some paperwork, we might seal the trailer. All those activities on the warehouse floor happen, but from our point of view, we're done and we're handing it back over to transportation.
Yep. So if we see now, we're currently in process in the warehouse. We haven't processed our goods movement. And just by hitting refresh after everything that occurred on Marco's side, we now see we're in execution. Warehousing processing has been completed, same with goods movement. So what we could expect next would be one of two things, just kind of depending on the order. But we remember we calculated our charges immediately upon assigning our carrier because we have a contract with them. So below I can see I have $1,000 for basic freight rate and then a 7% fuel surcharge. With my overall document flow, I can see all my orders, my deliveries, my warehouse component. Now, what I can expect is the carrier to go ahead and make sure that we're submitting a proper invoice. So we're back in our business network. And again, we're showing you the web UI. There's an EDI and API component for the larger carriers that automate this. The web UI is very good for like the mom and pop shops or somebody who wants to get directly in the system. So here I'm going to go ahead and just create an invoice name. I see that it's already calculating the charges based off my contract. So this makes it a little bit easy and helps reduce any mismatches, I'll say, because the carrier has it pre-populated. I can see my relevant business partners. Then what I can do next is I can input any notes or attachments in case it's going to deviate, but I'll go ahead and just submit my invoice for now. What this is going to do is it's going to come back to my TM. And once in here, when I refresh, I'm going to see that it's been submitted, but it's only in process. It hasn't posted yet because we're still missing the accrual of the freight cost in our system, which this would normally happen via a background job, but I'm going to go ahead and just create it here for you today. So we'll go ahead and create our freight settlement. And if we pause for just a second too, something that's worth noting, what I see with a lot of my customers is we've been using warehouse processes to drive our freight settlement document creation for many, many years. Typically, when the warehouse has issued a good or done PGI, that can be the driving factor for when we accrue our freight costs, depending on Incoterms. So this is something that we're already very familiar with, and there's already been that handshake with the warehouse. But if we keep going here, what we're going to see is as we post this freight settlement document, this is even allowing your cost to serve to go back to your FICO component, your finance system. We're going to generate a freight purchase order saying, here's the $1,070 that we spent on freight. It's going to get assigned to a particular purchasing org. Then we're going to have our service entry sheet, which gets generated, which breaks that 1,070 out into the charge types, which might be going to different GL accounts. And then under that, we'll have an agency business document, which helps you break that charge by charge type out, even down to the line item level within your sales order or delivery to ultimately help you get to your cost to serve a customer. Here we see it's already posted in real time. Now, all I have to do for my carrier invoice is hit post. And just like that, that's been assigned to the document flow, and we've posted our carrier's invoice as well. So if we go back to our document flow here, what we're going to see is a very happy path scenario where everything's been posted and the invoice has been verified and matched. And that pretty much wraps up our end-to-end digital supply chain demo. This was a little bit high level. Some of the stuff that we didn't have time to show here today would be, we saw the check-in process for the yard, for instance, but we didn't have time to go through the checkout process. So there's a lot of additional details that we can dive deeper into. But Maddie, I'll turn it back over to you because I know we have a lot of questions following the demo.
We do. And let's just get right into it. Bring Cam, Ganesh, and Bill back with us. Cam, I'm putting you on the spot, hitting you with the first question. You know, with more technologies, including SAP, shifting to cloud-based products, can we expect to continue to see more cross-solution problem solving like with advanced shipping and receiving?
Let me start by sharing a little bit of personal experience. I started my career as a logistics consultant a long time ago, relatively. So at that time, we used to have a server in every warehouse. This is how warehouse management used to run, because the RF can only connect to a local server and the internet was not good enough. And then customers started to trust the internet a little more, and they started having a server with multiple warehouses with some concerns and so on. Today, and even the customers we work with who decide to go on the on-prem strategy, they still want to own their license, they are still hosting this license with a hyperscaler or a data center, which means it is the cloud. It's not an SAP cloud, but it is a cloud solution. So the cloud is there. It's not anymore a nice to have. It is there everywhere we see. Second thing I want to talk about is, since we mentioned about the connected supply chain, I want to share some data on the business network, because when I talk business network, just to clarify the context of the data, it's not only at the business network for logistics, it's also business network for supply. So we're talking about customers, suppliers, carriers, logistics service providers. There are 5.3 million companies on SAP Business Network. The size of annual transaction is almost $5 trillion. The only reason I'm saying this is, imagine if this were to happen on-prem or point-to-point integration. It's impossible. So the power of the network today, what we have, the power of the cloud, the ability to connect one-to-many and many-to-many. We're onboarding one carrier. Recently, during the logistics event, C.H. Robinson were talking about similar topic. Imagine C.H. Robinson are connecting to the SAP Business Network for logistics once, and they work with hundreds of companies, doing everything from what the team has been able, tendering, invoice settlement, track and trace, and visibility. So today, moving to the cloud is not an option. SAP is leading in this way, especially in the logistics. So when we talk about connection internally, SAP has always been there. The ERP connecting, bringing more harmonization into the systems, SAP supply chain with your ERP, with the warehouse, and I'm sure Bill and Ganesh will talk more about specifically the advanced shipping and receiving, but also bringing the outside world, because a lot of things are happening outside our control. It's not enough to know that a vessel got stuck in the Suez Canal. We need to know what's on this vessel, when it would be recovered, which customer order, which production order is impacted. And really, this is what we talk about supply chain, when we talk about connected supply chain, and this could only be achieved with the cloud solutions and getting access to everyone. That's it.
Bill, Ganesh, do you have anything to add?
Ganesh, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can start. Yeah. So,
Okay.
Cam talked about cloud. So that's extremely strategic topic for many companies now moving to the cloud. There are a lot of advantages with respect to the total cost of ownership and the performance of the solution, etc. And from an extended warehouse management perspective, we provide a couple of options in the cloud. One is embedded along with S4. It's got its own advantages, and also a decentral, or what we call as extra stack, where you have a dedicated cloud EWM system. And the advantages of the latter are the fact that there are customers who are running highly automated, high volume warehouses where they need dedicated compute power. So such a decentral deployment makes a lot of sense. And the integration is back to S4 and TM and ER logistics, as we talked about. So ASR that Marco was talking about is actually a very significant strategic investment for us from EWM perspective when it comes to these cloud-based solutions. The reason being that, as Marco explained, you have one business object, freight order along, which is shared with TM, with EWM, with ER logistics. So we talked about the connected supply chain, connected processes, but you also need to look at the technical aspects of it, and the data aspects of it. How is data shared between different systems? Do you need to transform the data every time you move from one system to the other, or share information between different systems? So this really simplifies the whole integrated story when it comes to the end-to-end supply chain. And so this is definitely on our roadmap. We have started delivering to it, specifically in the decentral deployment of EWM. So this past month, we had our 2023 release of our private cloud solution, where we are now enabling customers to have a local TM along with a decentral EWM for outbound processes. And then in the coming releases, we'll continue to expand this capability with respect to ASR for inbound, for integration to GTS, and other intercompany processes. Along with this, from EWM perspective, we are also every release we have enhancements which are focused on integration with TM, with quality management, as well as with production. So we'll continue to be we deliver these capabilities from extended warehouse management solution perspective. Bill?
Yeah, thanks, Ganesh. It's interesting. You mentioned a couple of different things. Trying to tackle that. I mean, Marco, I actually really love the idea, the term you threw out there, merged more than converged. I'm definitely going to be stealing that going forward. So when we talk about, cross-solution problems like ASR for us, for TM and EWM, I don't want to speak for Ganesh, but it's definitely one of the bigger areas from a cross-solution problem we're solving, and Marco started to talk about a little bit as well, because again, the rationale is because we're all in the same, we're all S4, and initially we're all deployed, embedded in the same environment. It just made sense. Why have this where you have to basically do a export and re-import just to go from one side of the box to the other side of the box? So if you think about it from an ASR perspective, it was just, necessity is the mother of invention. It's also just simplifying it. So you didn't have data redundancy, you didn't have that coordination. And now, like Ganesh said, the 2023 release, we've even now extended it. So initially ASR only worked when everybody was in the same pool, if you will. Now we're basically enabling it where you can have TM and EWM, decentralized, and connect back to the ERP. In fact, we've even with this release, it's not just limited to S4 ERP, it can also even connect to an ECC ERP as well. And then I think Ganesh, you also mentioned from an extra stack perspective, from a cloud perspective, it's one of the things, that, it's from a flexibility perspective. This is something that we've seen, from a TM, adoption perspective. It can sometimes be the first thing folks adopt within their S4 transformation. Paul, you and I had a webinar, I think 2 months ago now, where we talked with Stamilt, who's a SAP TM customer. They were actually moving from another ERP to SAP ERP, but their biggest burning problem was actually they didn't have a TMS process. They didn't have a TMS at all. And so S4 TM was the pointy end of the spear, if you will. It was the first thing they adopted. In terms of SAP and in terms of S4, and then they've added on their ERP functionality as well. And then in terms of other cross-solution problems, I mean, ASR is obviously going to be something we're going to focus on. We came out 3 years ago, and every release we've had since 2020, we've had additional functionality. We're already talking about next gen use cases for subsequent releases. I think we've also touched on, somebody mentioned GTS, from a global trade. If you're doing anything internationally, how do we make sure we keep that fresh and up to date? We already have pre-built workflows from a TM to GTS, so that if you're shipping something internationally and both solutions are in place, there's a workflow basically say, oh, I see that this is an international shipment. Let me send the information over to global trade to do whatever it needs to from a check perspective, and TM will basically put a lock on it on that freight order or booking until it gets the thumbs up or green light back from GTS. We've already talked about BN4L, and these guys already walked through the demo of it, and BN4L, Business Network for Logistics. It's that collaboration part of our solution. So it's a cross-solution capability in terms of how do I communicate with my external partners, from a collaboration perspective with my carriers, and from a tracking perspective with my carriers, but also my external stakeholders. And then finally, I think from a cross solution, I think we're all required to mention sustainability at least once. It's almost like a de facto law, we have to say, but you know, that's another area. So in the last release, that came out last month, there's the ability within TM to basically define CO2 emissions per vehicle type, and then use that for a planning perspective, and then actually bring in actuals from your carriers via BN4L. And then so I can do a comparison of what was my planned emissions generation versus my actual. And you know, you can actually even use this as part of your optimization. So you're optimizing not just based on cost or time, but you're also optimizing based on what are my anticipated CO2 levels. And then at the end of the day, we can even share this information back to the core part of the organization, where they're tracking sustainability, not just from a functional perspective, but from a global perspective.
Yeah, and as we're talking about tracking and having visibility end to end, Marco, can you talk a little bit about what you see with customers shifting away from supply chain solutions and going towards a singular solution chain system?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say what we're experiencing is, and we alluded to that before, right? This was a big issue, and this is a C-level topic now. So when we have interactions where in the past we would have talked to a director of supply chain or a director of IT, now we're very often interacting directly with the C-level. This is a topic that's really visible and is driven top down, and with that, I think comes that shift in mindset, right? And then the CIO, IT is a cost function for an organization, right? The CIO and the CSO, if they have that role, supply chain office or the business roles, they're collaborating directly, and they're looking at how can we not just have low cost to serve, but how can we actually improve and how can we manage those disruptions, right? Very early in my career, I learned working with one of Germany's biggest retailers. The customer, you and I, we go to the supermarket, we don't find our favorite product, we turn around and we never come back. That's the mindset they have, right? So retailers, other, of course, customer-facing industries jumped on those capabilities, jumped on the technology that enables to serve and delight customers better. And that's where we see those big benefits, right? If it's driven top down, and if it's IT and business collaborating in the right way to define what that end-to-end process should look like, and we have a focus on just end-to-end collaboration, information sharing, those C-level executives, they also get a return on their invest. From an IT perspective, the old, what we always say in implementation projects, the old tools are still there, right? We lower the total cost of ownership, of course, if we have a single technology platform, if we have a single source of truth. With the cloud, the hosting cost, we can get shifted outside of the organization, right? But it's also that I have to, if I have less interfaces, I don't have to train people in different technologies. I have a best of breed strategy. I have different technologies and different experts. Usually those experts are very costly. So all that complexity is reduced. That simplifies my IT organization, and it still enables new capabilities. And that's where the business side comes in. So we mentioned a lot of those scenarios that are enabled, right? Real-time tracking of trucks, and then releasing your warehouse orders based on the proximity of a truck close to the warehouse. Yeah? This is enabled by those. So for the business executives, they get better customer service, they get better traceability and better collaboration capabilities out of that. And we see it as end customers, but of course also in the business world. I like to know where my product is, right? I like to know what's going on, and if there's any problems, and even better, what my supplier is doing right now to solve my problem. Yeah? So this is real-time collaboration also builds trust, and I think that's what we all needed after the pandemic, right? There was an erosion of trust into the supply chain, and all those solutions help rebuild that trust with visibility and reliability. We're becoming, what Paul mentioned, prescriptive to this problem. So we know even if there is a problem, we're prepared and we're ready to react. And then everybody pulls in the same direction. Yeah, so this is where we see just how do customers go about it. Yeah, it's more of a C-level topic, and we see that big push. And I want to ask Paul, because he's been working in a project where we had a really visible example of what a delay in the supply chain causes, right, and how an integrated supply chain helps resolve this. So Paul, it would be great if you can share that.
Yeah, thanks, Marco. Yeah, we called out the shift from supply chain solutions to a supply chain ecosystem or system. And one of the customer cases we bring up all the time is if we had a delay on the ocean of 10 days, in the past, this might look like you calling the freight forwarder or the ocean liner, bugging them for a status update. When's it going to get there? When's it going to get there? Calling your customer, calling your warehouse, calling your on-carriage carrier who's going to take it to that warehouse, and giving them a half-hearted update every couple of days. And that's that. What we've seen now with a lot of the solutions we've been talking about and showing is you have a visibility provider give you that 10-day estimated delay that triggers an output downstream to your on-carriage carrier, updating them in real time for here's the new time I need you to show up at the port. That instantly updates your end manufacturing site. And if you're using a planning solution like an IBP or a control tower, you can even in real time have that visibility of my expected input is delayed by 10 days. Now, what's the impact of the outputs going to be? Am I going to cause short shipments? Am I going to fall below safety stock levels? And it really does give you that more holistic, like Bill mentioned earlier, there's 8 people you got to call for TM. It really does automate a lot of that and give that clear line of sight in real time.
Talking about having that data in real time and looking at the vast amounts of data points available in the supply chain. Cam, what do you think can be improved in the area decision making, whether as an operator, a manager, or a customer?
I'm happy that we're at this stage now in this discussion, because we started earlier talking about connecting the supply chain, connecting the processes. Now we're getting into the data. How can we improve from there? So it's a great point to talk about. I think the biggest point that we see today is contextualizing the decision making, which means I want to move from visibility to insight. And I'll explain what does this mean. We have always talked about visibility, where is my shipment, and so on. But what does this mean, the 10 days delay that Paul talked about? What does this mean to your manufacturing? What does this mean to your customer? So if I'm a production planner today and the shipment is delayed for 10 days, and I'm sure we all agree that disruption will continue to happen. If it's not the Suez Canal, it's the Panama Canal, it's a pandemic. It's a global warming. It will continue to happen. So the idea is, how can I take this 10 days and make it as an insight to the users? If I'm a procurement, I need to know that I don't have enough supply. I need to go and find another sources of supply, and I need the system to help me here. If I'm a production planner, I need to know that I have to change my production plan because the raw material are not arriving. And this is the insight that we're talking about. It's not anymore about the visibility. Yes, I know that my shipment is delayed. So what? What does this mean to everyone, to the 8 people that Bill talked about? What does each one has a different role here and a different task to do? And this is where the systems, the connected supply chain and the connected systems play a role. And the good thing is, again, we talked about external is the business network and so on. All the applications today from SAP has embedded analytics. So you know what's happening in your warehouse, you know what's happening in your transportation. But when we take it outside to the organization, it's not only connecting with my trading partners, it's also reading data, risk data from outside. So I can check if there is a weather, if there is a storm, and be proactive to react to this before the challenge happens. And really, this is if one thing I want to leave everyone with is trying to eliminate the latency, is trying to eliminate these decisions, taking time to analyze and think and find the solution. Because the longer it takes us to decide on the action, the longer it costs, the more it costs money for the business. So in reality, if we want to do something, is we want to eliminate this latency and have a seamless connected supply chain.
Looking at all those capabilities available now, Bill, how do you see the role of practitioners in the supply chain space evolving over the next few years?
It's interesting because it's different things are going to happen. Like we weren't talking about sustainability like we even if 2-3 years ago. We've talked about it, but it hasn't had the focus. It's kind of like I think I forget who said it earlier, but the good news is everybody now knows what supply chain is. The bad news is everybody now knows what supply chain is. So there's new things that are coming out. Like sustainability has been something that we have to focus on. Whenever I've talked, with transportation, I've always talked about how we've always looked at sustainability. It's just everybody else has caught up to us in that regard. But in terms of space evolving, one of the other things that we're looking at is how do we leverage generative AI or Gen AI? How do we use that within going forward? We've got use cases that we're going to be launching next year where it'll help from a productivity perspective. One of the use cases is basically simplifying the check-in process, for certain locations where there's no documentation when the truck arrives. So there's nothing to check, their paperwork in our system. There's no ASN, there's no EDI, whatever. So how do we leverage Gen AI to basically take the digital scan of the paperwork the trucker gives you to simplify and make it easier for the rest of the process. So for gate check-in, for yard slot, where do I put it in the yard, and then even more importantly, when I get it, back it up against the dock door, that process. How do I simplify that? And so that's one way. I mean, from a TM perspective in general, we've always been about, how do we, help the planners do more with less. Okay, it's one of those things where we've always, and I've been doing this for, I don't want to say how long, but it's a long, long time. I put it this way, my first customers, when I walked in, they were literally using, putting pieces of paper up on a bulletin board, basically trying to figure out, okay, what can fit into a trailer. I think we can all agree that's kind of manual and yet kind of time consuming. So a TMS is going to automatically help with that. But where we're working with customers is how do we automate the processes so they're not, even if they're not doing that paper-based, physically manual process, but if they're manually creating each of the loads every single day, how do we automate that? So really what they're working with is the exceptions. And it's the true acceptance. So even the multi-stop, even the stuff that most people will go, wait a minute, I want to get them to basically slowly adopt that kind of technology. So they're really only working with the true exceptions where you have the monkeys and the bananas that you're trying to put in the same trailer, or the stuff that doesn't quite fit right, so that you can work with those as the exception. Or look at, more forward-looking, what do I need to do to, be the shipper of choice, so that, when I basically have my processes in place, carriers want to move my freight. Okay, so it's really, so you're trying to automate as much as humanly possible, and use the technology to help that, so that I can focus on areas where, I can, it's the exceptions, but it's also where I can do the most value add. That's where I see us really, looking, more and more, and it's using technology, whether it's the convergence with TM and EWM, or Gen AI, or sustainability. How do we capture that information and share it internally as well? So those are just some of the areas I see us moving.
Ganesh, do you want to talk a little bit about the role of practitioners in the supply chain space, and a little bit about how we can better attract workforce in warehouses?
Sure. Yeah. So this whole concept of smart warehousing is evolving. So we talked about the process integration, et cetera, and adoption of technology and automation. And they're basically driven by largely three factors. One is, obviously the reason to reduce costs. The other reason is more kind of what's happened in the last few years. that Marco also alluded to, the need for companies to be able to address faster order fulfillment rates, higher order volume rates with the rise of e-commerce that has had a significant impact on warehouse operations. And then also using technology to simplify and reduce the manual tasks. There's a lot of different manual tasks that are prevalent inside the warehouse, and how do you reduce them, simplify them, so the workers can and the people working in the warehouse can be better utilize their time and effort. So given this, in the coming years, the warehouse workforce will increasingly find themselves working alongside technology, and the way they traditionally have been performing some of these warehouse tasks are going to be evolving and changing with technology alongside. They have to be more comfortable working with technology, like working alongside robots, with collaborative robots. We talked about that a bit in earlier part of the webinar. Also leveraging augmented reality, like using augmented reality glasses, or even mobile applications that can take a picture of a shelf and be able to analyze the images, and with computer vision technology be able to assist in the picking process. A lot of our customers are already on that journey already and seeing a lot of value. Artificial intelligence and machine learning is another big evolving area. Earlier this year, we released machine learning for slotting, which is a very tedious process that warehouse slotting analysts might have to go through. And with analyzing the past data of similar products when you introduce a new product, machine learning can help automate the slotting decisions, and the technology and the algorithms retrain themselves, so they get better over time in making these slotting decisions. And then, Marco and Cam talked about the use of data, visualization, and decision making. So warehouse supervisors and managers will have more data on hand available through this automation process, so they can analyze the key performance indicators of the warehouse, both at the strategic level as well as an operational level, to be able to better understand the workload distribution, utilization of resources within the warehouse, utilization of labor, etc. And with the ability to understand what are the trends that are forming and perform root cause analysis. So not just being able to visualize this information, but also understand how to interpret that information and how to make better decisions, so that they can maximize the utilization of the warehouse workforce, and so that they can spend more time on value-added services and thereby increasing productivity.
Thank you, Ganesh. That brings us to our next question perfectly. We've talked a lot about what's happening now and what's happening in the future. But Michael, could you talk a little bit about what customers can do to prepare or to start this journey?
Sure, it's a very relevant question. A lot of customers are asking themselves, given the fact that they are looking at quite a lot to do, right? So, and I like that you're using the term journey, because I like to compare this to going on a road trip or on vacation. So if you're starting your road trip with 5 or 6 gallons in the tank, well, guess what? After 100 miles, you have the first fuel stop. And if you then reach your destination and you figure out that one of your kids forgot their suitcase, you will have the next problem. And if then you went to Yellowstone, although your wife wanted to go to Hawaii and your kids wanted to go to Disneyland, you might have ended up doing a vacation, but you didn't listen, and no one is happy in the end of the day. So it's all about preparation. Yeah. So clearly outline what you want to achieve and where you want to go in terms of what you want to achieve, right? So look at the challenges you have today in your supply chain. Your warehouse is not running as efficient as you want. That's a challenge. Do you know why? That's where you have to go. Your transportation department deals the entire day with problems, calling carriers, basically what Paul has outlined with the 10-day delay on the ocean. That's a challenge, but do you know why this challenge actually occurs? So you really have to understand where you are having those problems nowadays, and from there derive where you want to go and have all the stakeholders internally involved. So it's not an IT transformation. This is a business topic. So talk to your business, talk to the guys who are doing all of this in the field, yeah, who are running the warehouse and operating, who are doing the transportation. Talk to them and define a common goal that you can also, in the end of the day, measure with KPIs, yeah, because in the end of the day, we want to make sure that an implementation is successful. And the way you can assess that is obviously by setting KPIs and measuring against them. Saying in the end of the day, hey, we made our warehouse more efficient is great, but if you don't measure it, you will never know how much efficiency gain you actually had. So this is very, very important that, first of all, prepare, understand where you're, what are the challenges today, where do you want to go tomorrow. And then I think we have also heard this throughout the last 1.5 hours. Technology is changing so fast. So learn about the technology and learn about what is possible. Yeah, so make sure that you know what are relevant use cases with AI, for example, in my field of processes that I'm doing, so that you kind of also know what is the art of the possible when you are starting that journey. And then another topic that is very important is obviously data, right? So this is, as we have said, quite a big transformation, and that is going to be built on data. Data nowadays is gold, and everyone is saying that. It's not new. But if your data is not in place and not harmonized before we start that process and that journey, we will have obstacles along the way because we are not building on a strong fundament in the end of the day. And I think we have talked about this a lot already. Change management again. Make sure that you're involving everyone who is going to have or who is going to be affected here. So it's not only your internal personnel, it's everyone that you're working with. It's your business partners, it's your customers, it's your carriers that will be affected by you shifting your supply chain onto the next level. And this is something you have to make them aware of. And don't make them aware of 4 weeks before you go live. That's way too late. And if then someone comes around the corner and says, here, I have a problem with this, well, guess what's happening? You're shifting your go live and your project cost is going to rise. So make sure that as early as possible, you're involving everyone who is going to be affected by this and tell them this is what's happening. And even if it's something like telling your customer, in the future, you're going to receive status updates from us that your order has departed or your order has been shipped or whatever it is. Tell them, they will appreciate it because you will give them enough time on their side to make sure that they can prepare for that change accordingly, and not just basically telling them a couple of days before this happens and then they have to figure it out themselves.
Thanks, Michael. So at this point in time, we're prepared and ready to go. Paul, can you talk a little bit about how somebody would actually start this journey, who they would get in contact with, what the steps are for them?
Yeah, absolutely, Maddie. So, I mean, first off, everything Michael said was so true. And I'm definitely stealing that road trip metaphor. I like that a lot. But you can reach out to anybody on this call here today. You can go to, the Westernacher website, and we're happy to walk you through kind of what next steps can look like. Typically, what we do for a lot of customers might look at something like a discovery call just to understand where you're at in your journey, what steps make sense to happen next. We've done seamless supply chain assessments, inspiration days. It really just depends on your readiness and, again, where you're at. There is quite an element of system and organizational readiness. If you're still on ECC, what enhancement pack? Have you made it to business partners yet? Is your IT and business bought in? There's a lot of those discovery calls that we've had where we uncover some internal topics, and a month later we're ready to re-engage and talk to y'all after you've figured out a way forward. But I mean, end of the day, we have very active practices engaged across the board. For the purpose of this call, again, I'll call out transportation management, warehousing, yard. We've done a large number of rollouts across the globe, as well as with the business network, and we collaborate pretty frequently on projects, and we like to think we'd be the partner of choice for delivering you the process change enabled by technology and your team that you'd need to move forward and, again, improve your supply chain solution and system.
That's awesome. That wraps up all of the questions that and all of the topics that we wanted to talk about. So we are now moving on to answering live audience questions. We have a few already submitted, and to all the audience, if you have more questions, please submit them, and we can answer your questions in real time. Marco, I'm coming to you with the first question. Are there any benefits to launching a larger supply chain program and implementing multiple programs at once?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think that's probably one of the most asked questions that Michael and Paul and myself are getting at the moment, because we're representing practices, but this is just the way Westernacher is organized, right? Because we have expert specialists, but there is a significant benefit if done in the right sequence and in the right combination. That's the consultant's answer, of course, but maybe let me unpack that a little bit. So let's say I'm just looking at my warehouse and my yard, or I'm looking at my transportation and my warehouse capabilities, right? From a pure cost perspective, it does make sense if you engage with somebody like us. There's always a project organization. So this is not the experts, the consultants that do the work, but there's an organization behind, right? So there's always efficiencies of scale in that sense. If you have one organization managing 2-3 work streams, you save cost for that. Yeah, so that's, let's say, just a very, very basic cost benefit. On the other hand, thinking about solutions like Bill and Ganesh talked about a little bit, advanced shipping and receiving, and that's where we see the bigger benefits. Yeah? I always like to say, you want to have all the people in the room to raise their hand and stopping you from closing a door somewhere, talking in silos. I said it in the very beginning. If we're looking at processes, we want to look at it end to end. Supply chain is very complex in the details. So you want to make sure when you do those things collaborative, that you have, let's say, maybe the warehousing viewpoint and the transportation viewpoint together, so that you're setting yourself up for the future, right? If you just start very sequentially and say, I start with warehousing, then I do yard, then I do transportation, you have us as experts and we help guide you, but you're missing your organizational view on the other hand, right? Where your experts within your organization from the different departments can say, look, the experts can tell me whatever they want all day, but this is what we need. This is how our process works. And with that being said, you really benefit when you do those things together from having that global holistic viewpoint, right? Designing an end-to-end process. So that's the part of getting the right information and getting the right processes in place. But now, how do you approach it, right? What's best to start with? And that really depends on the organization. We typically see that there's, I say for warehousing, a good example, right? I talk to a lot of customers right now that are on an old AS400 that has been custom built for 30 years, and the last person that knows how it actually works is about to retire. Yeah, so that's a burning platform. So it does make sense to start with, with that, probably with EWM replacing that solution. What we want to do is still maybe add workshops. What Paul said, start the program off with a strategic assessment workshop of what else do we have to consider, right? Are we going to transportation later or together? But you start off with a more holistic view, and then you branch out and do the different solutions. I don't know, Paul, Michael, if you want to add anything to that, but that would be my very generic answer. There's no silver bullet or standardized answer, right? It really depends on the specific situation that you're in.
I think you pretty much hit the nail. Sorry, Paul. I think you pretty much hit the nail on its head, right? So this, you will only gain the visibility and also the value of integrating everything together if you look at everything at once. Yeah. And as Marco has said, you can definitely look at things next or side by side. Let's put it like that. But we have also seen in the past that customers started with a warehouse implementation, for example. Then 2 years later, they added transportation management and yard logistics on top of that. And all of a sudden in the project, we saw a lot of challenges with that, right? Because we were having problems connecting the warehouse project process now into the transportation process, given the fact that it wasn't really aligned with anything that was happening now. So these are pitfalls that you will always see if you are not starting everything at once, because and it's a natural thing that will happen. If a transportation management project is happening, it will focus on transportation management without really going left or right. Same for warehousing, same for yard. But if we are looking at everything together at once, you will automatically create that conversation along all the stakeholders internally that need to be aligned.
Awesome. We have another question that came in. Ganesh, I'm throwing this one to you. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? With cybersecurity and network connectivity issues on the rise, taking WMS to the cloud is a risk for multiple site installations. Oh, I think you're muted.
All the cloud solutions that SAP provides follow the cloud requirements when it comes to security, compliance, and privacy. So from a security perspective, we cover various aspects that are related to security, like security governance, audit and compliance, business resilience, cyber defense, threat and risk assessment, global physical security, as well as development security and operations. So that's part and parcel of our delivery as a cloud solution provider, irrespective of its solution, including WMS. So from a cyber defense perspective, we monitor and provide alerts for any suspicious activities and vulnerabilities. We conduct routine scans of external facing web infrastructure and third-party penetration tests, and deploy red team testing to evaluate system security, etc. So, and the customer has a choice of which hyperscaler to use. We provide ability for the customer to choose either Azure, AWS, or Google Cloud, or SAP Data Center.
I might want to add something to that, Maddie. This is my personal perspective, and being in this business for over 20 years, right? I've always had an interest in those cybersecurity topics, because you see those big cases in the media, yeah? And you see some customers having an incident and then having to shut down operations. Yeah, the same way we've talked about that our supply chain solutions has evolved, the cybersecurity tool set has evolved. And this might be my personal opinion here, but if I look at some of the organizations we're working with, they have a smaller IT budget to defend themselves than an organization like Microsoft or Amazon, right? So there's tools out there that use AI actually to detect anomalies in network traffic and proactively take action. Yeah, those solutions are cutting edge sometimes and very costly. So my viewpoint would be, you're probably, if you have the budget and the might of a Microsoft, in the cloud behind, you might be better protected than what you can actually afford within your own organization. That's that aspect, right? So from that perspective, I would say going to the cloud can enhance your security. It's just maybe a transition period we're in right now, in a perception period. Same way as they're saying that autonomous cars right now are a risk on the road, but later we probably as humans will be banned driving because we're causing more accidents than the actual autonomous cars, right? Because they're more safe to drive. And I think that's where it's going as of today. The other topic I quickly want to mention, right? Network connectivity in that sense. In the past, you had somebody dig up a cable and cut the power, right? And then you were offline. Today with the cloud, well, there's a risk, but the same way as I repeated again what we said earlier, right? The same way we have evolved being more aware of supply chain risk and having contingencies in place, the same way we have evolved with our technology to work with the cloud. So specifically to your warehouse point, our solutions can buffer for some time being offline, right? The operations go on, we buffer everything that's going on locally, and once the network becomes available again, then we seamlessly synchronize our data. If you want to take the example of the power line, right? You might have a generator in your basement today. Well, but that generator goes for a certain time period only, and in the same way it's with the cloud or with other solutions. There's always backup solution that gets you that far. But if there's let's say a power outage for several days in a certain region, then everyone has an issue. It doesn't matter if you're on-prem or if in the cloud, right? There's just a problem. So it's about active risk management and being aware of those things and leveraging the technology that's out there, because this is a topic that a lot of organizations deal with.
Yeah, and is there any intricacies, especially with manufacturing facilities that double as a warehouse within that?
Maybe that's a very good question. I see that's an aspect of that, right? We're seeing in the projects we're doing or in the conversations we're having that when we talk about convergence on the supply chain, the converging happens also with the shop floor. So the solutions we're building are increasingly connected on that lower level. I like to use that analogy in the pharma industry. They use this a lot. They have actual standards where they say at a certain layer, the solutions have to be autonomous from interruptions with the network connectivity to an ERP system, for example, right? So the warehouse and the shop floor grow together more and more. Those robots that Ganesh was talking about, they drive, pick up some product and drive straight into the shop floor. Yeah? So if those solutions are built, designed the right way, again, breaking down those walls and removing those silos, they're more resilient from the get-go. And then if the technical infrastructure behind enables that buffering, what we said, right, that continuity, then you actually have, I would say, a better resilience to problems than you would have had in the past. So the technology enables more resilience today than was even possible before. I hope that answers the question. I don't know who asked it, but happy to discuss this further. This is a very big topic.
Marco likes to explain it all. Bill and Cam, can you talk about what the advantages there are to go from, well, to compare SAP versus best of breed?
Bill, do you want to start?
I'll defer to you.
Okay. So I worked half of my career with what used to be called best of breed. So I spent 15 years implementing. And when I joined SAP 11 years ago, during the interview, they asked me, what do you know about SAP supply chain? I said, nothing good. I was competing with them all my life. But what I want to say today is there is nothing best of breed anymore. What we talk about is best in class functionality. And companies like Gartner and others have placed SAP solutions in the leading Magic Quadrant. So if you look at SAP TM, SAP EWM for the last 10 years, 9, 10 years, they have been in the Magic Quadrant. So what we're talking about is there is no more best of breed in terms of functionality advantages at all. So what you're talking about is everything we talked about today about connectivity, about the value of contextual decision making, it only applies to SAP. It only applies because it's the same harmonized process going across all your business. And I want to give an example. You might have heard me talking about it before because we used to struggle a lot with it. Let's take a customer return. Where does it start? It could start in a store, in a warehouse, online. Then you have transportation to bring it to the warehouse. Then you have quality. Then you have disposition code, return to stock, return to vendor. And then you have a credit note. Then you have to ship it to the supplier and so on. If you look at SAP today, it's a single process called customer return, and you have full visibility across everything that happened, every single process, which means that if anything gone wrong, if the order is delayed, if the financial implications, this can't be achieved in any way. And I'm not talking about interfaces. You can build as many interfaces as you want, but many times you're missing a lot of the steps. As simple as a cycle count in a warehouse. Nobody does automatic adjustment. How does this affect the most of the time when we talk about a standalone system, I don't want to use the 10 best of breed because it's not relevant anymore. So when you have a third-party application, what do? You put it in a virtual location called Lost, and the end of the month you go and find out how to manage this. So this is all the advantages that we talked about today, the ability to have relevant information, contextual decision-making, eliminating latency, will only apply when you have this single modular solution that's able to provide data and communicate back and forth in real-time information. And this is what SAP is offering today.
And let me expand on that a little bit. I mean, it's interesting because we've talked about it, you know, kind of the theme for the conversation today is, you know, what's the value of connectivity? And that is in its essence, the benefit of going with full SAP or nearly everything, because of the fact that if we're talking about our solutions, you know, there's an expectation from within and from our customers that if it's SAP talking to SAP, it should, basically, I hate using the term, but go seamlessly. It's like, it's an overused term, but, there is an expectation there. It's not like, TM has done the costing for it and it's going to hand it off to accounting and it's going to do the Heisman and basically say, oh, throw it over the wall here, accounting, take this. No, there's an expectation that, it's the data flows, just that way. Likewise with EWM. I mean, so again, from us, I would see the benefit is when we are talking about, we've already touched on it, like GTS, EWM, all the different parts of the business process flow. We basically are making sure that the data flows the right way. And I'll talk about TM because, of course, it's the center of the universe. But hey, it's if you're talking about an order flow process, one of the things we always talk about is, from a TM perspective, the minute you hit save on a sales order, it's available in TM for planning. And not only that, but I always say adds and deletes are easy. Anybody can do them. This is kind of what piggyback on what Cam said, anybody can build that integration from add delete. That's easy. But managing the changes and managing the exceptions, that's where we spend a lot of time also, and we have logic there called change controller, which basically, we've designed it to help manage and help simplify that. And we talked about ASR, again, that's a situation where we've looked at and worked with our customers, worked with folks like Westernacher, basically say, okay, we used to do it where we basically said, take the freight order, export it, send it over to EWM, and they create a transportation unit. Is that the best we can do? It works great for a lot of folks, but we realized, what, we can improve it. And that's where ASR came from. So again, it's one of these things where, and now we're basically, we're both working off the same object. We didn't even talk about this, but you could say, I'm going to start the process in TM, I'll create the freight order, or, the load, and hand it off to EWM so they can do their wave planning and all that. Or we even, I think that's actually one of our earliest use cases was we could even do the reverse. We could have, with a warehouse, create the freight order based on what their wave plan is, what their plan is, and then hand it back to TM and basically say, hey, do a routing for this, or if it's single pick, single drop, do a carrier selection, okay? So again, for us, we're always looking for how do we make sure, we're making it easier. And I think multiple people said, easier to connect the different processes, making sure we have end-to-end process coverage, but then also, how do we, when you do that, you're also helping lower your whole TCO as well. So, there's a lot of advantage there, obviously. So, but I'm biased.
And one last point I wanted to just quickly add was business network, right? So, I mean, that's very, very essential. We have a business network, kind of an ecosystem that we have for logistics providers, and that's what you get off the bat when you integrate with TM, and that's a huge benefit, and with all different modes of transportation, etc. So
yeah, and I mean,
a lot of advantages of that customers get with the SAP suite of solutions.
Yeah, and real quick to close up on that, thanks for bringing that up, Ganesh. I mean, that was actually inspired by feedback from our customers that basically said, hey, you've got critical mass now on TMS. Don't make us have to set up all these point-to-point connections. Why are we all having to have our own individual portals, or God help me, even worse, all of us doing our own mappings via EDI to basically connect to the same carriers? And that was really the beginnings of the business network, to basically say, hey, you're right, how about we basically become a central hub where anybody who's an SAP customer from a transportation perspective, they can connect to one place, and if the carriers are already connected, you can connect to them, or you can work with us to bring on carriers or bring on different networks. So yeah, that's a great point.
All right, Paul, can you share what pitfalls people should avoid when implementing multiple solutions at once?
Yeah. So I'll maybe start with a few that have already been called out here today. I mean, Marco called out silos, right? Like if you're implementing multiple solutions at once, I think the worst thing you can do is treat them as silos for here's how we're going to build our warehouse, here's how we're going to build TM, here's how we're going to build the yard. Everybody go design it, we'll meet at the end and test. That will not work. There has to be clear communication and a real process focus on day one. How are we going to handle outbound with yard check-in, check-out, TMS, warehouse? What about inbound? The second thing really comes to organizational change management, which I know has been thrown out a few times. You have to have that vision from the leadership team as to why we're doing the project, what the pain points are today, and what the future is going to look like. Having that clear line of sight to why we're doing something and having that vision reiterated through the project and the move to future state, and also having a strong leadership presence from the customer side, I think is very important to make sure the project gets driven home. And the final point I'd say would maybe be don't bite off too much at once. I can't tell you how many RFPs I get that list pure running functionality, which is great. We can of course do that. But back to the change management point, if your transportation team is on pen and paper today and responding to emails, do you think it's going to be best practice to have them completely move to, your IBP solution doing automated carrier contracting and updates happening completely virtually? There might be a little sense of loss of control and lack of trust in the system. So just maybe take it one bite at a time and reasonable change. But that's it from my side. Michael, I know you might have some points on this from recent rollouts.
Yeah, and it's actually a very good question, and I always bug my colleagues Marco and Paul with that, because from being responsible for yard, we are kind of always at the last point in the food chain. One thing that we haven't really talked about is testing in the project. So we have talked about silos and breaking those silos and trying to get everyone together, and that there is a lot of change implication. But obviously, we in the implementation project, we are reaching a time where we have to test the solution, and be aware that the testing is completely different if you're looking at a logistics platform that you're implementing versus a single solution that you're deploying in a warehouse. Yeah? Because anything that you're changing in TM, and you've seen this in the demo that the freight order is the central object nowadays, anything that you change there will have an impact in the warehouse, will have an impact in the yard, and needs to be tested and followed through. So we break the silos, as we have said, but also when we are getting there and deploying this the system in the end of the day, make sure you're dedicating enough time and also resources for testing to make sure that whatever you're deploying is bulletproof, because it is mission and business critical in the end of the day. And we don't want to find in the first week of the go live that something is not working because somewhere downline in the process anything has been changed, and now the warehouse is not really aware of that change and has problems with the internal warehouse processes because of that. So testing is crucial. Make sure you have a testing strategy in place as early as possible. Should be part of any design exercise that you're doing, to already talk about testing and go live, and then follow this through also once you're deploying the solution.
Awesome. And let's see, I'm just checking to see if we have any more questions that came in. Let's see, Marco, if you want to take our last question quickly, how can I ensure that I follow a fit to standard approach during such implementations?
Yeah, that's a very loaded question. Good one.
You only have 3 minutes.
Yeah. I will try to make it short. First of all is, of course, have a team in place that you trust to make the right decisions. Because when we talk about fit to standard, right, and having a standard solution, this is where Cam comes from, where I come from. I've done custom tailored warehouse management systems at the beginning of my career. I got sick of it. That's why I joined the SAP world. In the end, there's an importance of looking at what makes your business unique and what is common capabilities and functions. If you're trying to customize what everybody else needs and does, you're wasting your time and money. But if you don't try to at least address in the standard solution what makes your business unique or competitive, then you're not doing yourself a favor as well. So I think it's very important in the beginning to look at this strategically with the right partners like us, bringing in an external view maybe, or just bringing in a comparative view, and then dissecting and putting this in those buckets, right? Where I give you an example in the warehouse, RF, right? RF screens, there's a right way to do it, and you don't need to tailor everything to this, right? So you want to make sure you have some standardization, maybe across sites even, because there's a huge historic chance. If you do an implementation, you can standardize things across your facilities, across your sites, your network. But then if there's unique capabilities that provide better customer service or give you an edge, we want to talk about those things, and we will help you uncover those. The other thing is leverage the tools that you have at hand. There's, for example, what we as Westernacher see a lot in the past year, I would say, there's a new tool that SAP offers called Signavio. Signavio helps you first mine your existing systems and identify your as-is processes, and then benchmark against best practice. So really, the tool helps you quickly get to what am I doing today and what is too complicated, right? And are there opportunities to simplify? So in the IT world or in the startup world, they always say fail often and fail fast, right? We can't afford that in the enterprise world, but I think this comes down to visibility again. Know what you do today, know where you're too complicated, and then use the right tools to really look at where am I unique and where do I benefit from a standard solution the most. That will be the fast answer.
All right. Well, thank you all for your time. Cam, Ganesh, Bill, thank you for joining us and sharing your expertise. And Paul, Marco, Michael, thank you all for your great information. To all of our viewers, thank you for joining. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to anybody on this call today. Westernacher is happy to have you, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.